Watch this moment carefully. The room is formal. The protocol is precise. The flags are positioned exactly where they should be. The staff are standing exactly where they should be standing. And the language being used with the careful, loaded, deliberate vocabulary of high-level diplomatic exchange is the language of two equals meeting at the very pinnacle of international affairs. But the man sitting in that chair, receiving that foreign dignitary, commanding that room, operating inside that protocol, is not the King of England. He is the Prince of Wales. And yet nobody in that room is behaving as though there is any difference whatsoever. This is the reality of the British monarchy in 2024 and 2025 that no official palace statement will confirm, that no spokesman will acknowledge on the record, and that no constitutional document yet formally reflects. William is running the show. Not in title, not in law, not in the official, ceremonial, publicly declared sense that will only arrive on the day Charles either dies or formally abdicates, but in practice. In the daily, grinding, relationship-dependent, decision-shaping work of actually operating a constitutional monarchy in the 21st century. The keys to the kingdom have already changed hands. The announcement simply has not been made yet. And before we go any further, if this is the kind of forensic, unfiltered royal commentary that you actually want in your life, hit that like button right now, subscribe to this channel, and turn on notifications. Because what I am about to show you tonight is the story that the palace does not want trending. And the algorithm is not going to help us unless you do. Tonight, we go inside the transfer of power that is reshaping the British crown in real time. We follow the evidence. We trace the constitutional architecture. We expose the specific decisions, the specific meetings, the specific moments that reveal a shadow reign already well underway. And we ask the question that constitutional historians and senior political insiders are beginning to whisper to one another in private. At what point does an unofficial transfer of power become a full constitutional crisis? Let us begin at the foundation. Because to understand how William has accumulated this level of operational authority and how quickly he has done it, you need to understand a mechanism buried in British constitutional law that the vast majority of people have never heard of, never studied, and never needed to think about. The Counsellors of State. Under the Regency Act of 1937, subsequently amended through further legislation, the sovereign is permitted to delegate certain royal functions to a designated group of senior royals known as Counsellors of State. These are qualified members of the royal family who are legally empowered to act in the monarch's name when the monarch is incapacitated, when the monarch is overseas, or when the monarch is otherwise unable to perform specific constitutional duties. This is not a new idea. It is not a loophole. It is a deliberate constitutional mechanism with genuine historical precedent. It was used during the final, difficult years of George VI's illness. It was deployed on numerous occasions when the late Queen Elizabeth was undertaking overseas visits. It is a functioning, tested, established part of the British constitutional machinery. But here is what makes the current situation genuinely unprecedented. The scale of its application, the continuity of its application, and the degree to which it is extended far beyond the formal, documented, publicly recorded functions it was designed to cover. Charles's cancer diagnosis, announced in February 2024, did not incapacitate him in the complete, total sense that the Regency Act was originally designed to address. He has continued to appear publicly. He has continued to sign state documents. He has continued to hold certain audiences and perform certain functions. He remains, constitutionally, fully the king. But the volume, the sheer, relentless, grinding volume of what a working modern monarch is expected to do on any given day, the intelligence briefings, the government consultations, the private diplomatic audiences, the ceremonial functions, the constitutional consultations, the relationship maintenance with prime ministers and foreign heads of state and senior officials across every department of government. That volume has been quietly, systematically, and deliberately redistributed. And the primary recipient of that redistribution is Prince William. Not randomly, not as a temporary administrative convenience, not as a stopgap measure while Charles recovers his strength, by design. Charles, according to sources who have spoken carefully and off the record to journalists covering the story, has made a deliberate and considered decision, not simply to manage the practical consequences of his illness, but to use this period, this brutal, frightening, clarifying, perspective-altering period of serious illness, to do something that no British monarch has attempted in modern times, in quite this way, with quite this degree of intentionality. To actively transfer real authority to his heir. Not symbolic authority, not the authority to open buildings and deliver speeches and smile at camera crews outside hospitals. Real authority. The kind of authority that shapes actual decisions. The kind that puts fingerprints on actual policy. The kind that leaves a mark on how Britain is governed, how Britain is represented internationally, and how the relationship between the Crown and the elected government of the United Kingdom actually functions from one week to the next. And William, who has spent the entirety of his adult life being told to wait, to prepare, to exercise patience, to suppress his instincts and his ambitions and his formidable political intelligence in deference to his father's reign, William is not wasting a single day of this. Let us get specific. Because the evidence of William's expanded authority is not hidden. It is not buried in classified documents or whispered in private corridors. It is visible, documented, a matter of public record if you know what you are looking at and you understand the significance of what you are seeing. Throughout 2024, Prince William's engagement calendar shifted fundamentally in its character and its ambition. The visits to food banks and mental health charities and community centres, important work, valuable work, the traditional, expected, respectable work of a senior working royal did not disappear. But alongside them, a new category of engagement became regular, became prominent, became unmistakably central to how William is operating. Strategic engagements, political engagements, constitutional engagements. William met directly with the incoming Prime Minister following the July 2024 United Kingdom general election. Not a brief, ceremonial, photographic introduction of the kind that protocol demands. A substantive, extended, working conversation about the relationship between the Crown and the new Labour government. The precise kind of conversation that, under the constitutional conventions of the British system, belongs to the sovereign. That meeting, that conversation, that relationship-building exercise was carried out by William. On behalf of the Crown, as the Crown's operational representative, William was the primary royal representative of the Crown at the D-Day 80th anniversary commemorations in Normandy in June 2024. Charles attended, but Charles's participation was visibly, publicly, undeniably limited by his health. It was William who stood where the king would normally stand. It was William who carried the weight of the Crown's presence at one of the most significant international commemorations of recent years. William received heads of state. William received senior foreign dignitaries in formal audiences conducted with full diplomatic protocol. And the court circular, which is the official, formal, daily record of royal engagements, published by the palace, recorded these audiences in language that is, under normal circumstances, reserved for the monarch. Read it carefully. The language matters. In the British constitutional system, language is not decorative. Language is legal. Language carries constitutional weight. And the language being used to describe William's activities in the court circular has shifted in ways that every constitutional scholar who has been paying attention has noticed. But beyond the public record, beyond what is documented in the court circular and reported in the press, there are the private briefings, the intelligence briefings, the government briefings, the constitutional consultations that flow from Whitehall to the palace as a matter of established practice. These briefings have always gone to the heir to the throne. That is not new. William has been receiving some level of government briefing for years, but sources familiar with the current arrangement describe a frequency, a depth, and a nature of engagement that goes significantly and qualitatively beyond the traditional Prince of Wales model. He is not being briefed as a future king who needs to be kept informed and gradually prepared. He is being briefed as a present king who needs to be kept current because he is making present decisions. There is a distinction there. It is not a subtle distinction. And every single person inside the system, in the palace, in Whitehall, in the cabinet office, in the Prime Minister's private office, knows that the distinction exists, even if none of them will say so on the record. The formal constitutional architecture of the United Kingdom still names Charles. The Crown, in its formal, legal, constitutional sense, is still Charles. The Privy Council operates in Charles's name. The relationship between sovereign and Prime Minister, established by centuries of convention, precedent, and constitutional tradition, is still formally the relationship between Charles and whoever holds the office of Prime Minister. But the informal architecture, the relationships, the trust, the actual working partnerships, the real lines of communication and decision-making between the palace and Whitehall is being reconstructed around William. And here is the thing that anyone who truly understands the British constitutional system will tell you, if they are being honest and not performing reassurance. In the British system, informal architecture is frequently more powerful than the formal kind. The conventions, the relationships, the unwritten rules, the patterns of trust and communication that have built up over years are not decorative, they are structural. They hold the system together. And right now, those structural relationships are being relocated. They are being transferred from one man to another, in real time, in full view, without a single public announcement. Now, here is where the power transfer becomes genuinely complicated. Here is where it stops being an interesting constitutional story and becomes something more charged, more personal, more fraught with historical tension. Because William's consolidation of authority is not happening inside an institution that is culturally or emotionally comfortable with change. Buckingham Palace, specifically, as opposed to Kensington Palace where William operates, is populated by people whose entire professional identities are built around serving Charles. The King's private secretary, the King's communications operation, the senior courtiers and advisors who have worked in Charles's orbit, some of them for decades. These people have built their careers, their institutional loyalties, their professional self-understanding around the assumption that Charles is the sun around which the palace revolves. These are not William's people. William has his own operation, his own team at Kensington Palace, his own private secretary, his own communications apparatus, his own circle of advisors, many of whom have been thinking and planning and working specifically toward a William reign for years. People who are, professionally and intellectually and strategically, oriented toward the future rather than the present. As William's operational authority expands, as more and more of the real, substantive work of the monarchy flows through Kensington Palace rather than Buckingham Palace, the question of which institutional machinery actually executes that authority, which team, which set of loyalties, which structural framework, is becoming a daily source of institutional friction that is genuinely difficult to manage. People close to the situation describe it carefully. Nobody uses the word conflict. The British establishment does not use the word conflict about itself. But the language they do use different approaches, competing priorities, the ongoing challenge of institutional transition that is the diplomatic vocabulary of an institution that is managing a genuine power struggle while being constitutionally and culturally prohibited from acknowledging that the power struggle exists. And then there is Camilla. Queen Camilla holds a title and a constitutional position that carries genuine dignity and genuine weight, while Charles is king. She performs her role with a skill and a professionalism that even her critics would be forced to acknowledge has been considerably more impressive than many expected. She has, over the years, won over portions of a British public that was initially deeply, viscerally, historically hostile to her presence inside the royal family. But Camilla's institutional power, her influence in the operational machinery of the palace, her access to the real working mechanisms of the crown, exists primarily and fundamentally through her relationship with Charles. She is the queen consort. That status, and everything that flows from it, is dependent on Charles's active occupancy of the throne. As Charles's operational presence in the daily running of the monarchy diminishes even incrementally, even gradually, Camilla's institutional foundation narrows with it. William's relationship with Camilla has been described, consistently and carefully, by palace sources and royal correspondents, as cordial, professionally respectful, appropriately warm in public. The language of managed civility between two people who understand that their relationship is watched, analysed, and interpreted by millions of people. But cordial, in this context, is doing an extraordinary amount of heavy lifting. William has not forgotten Diana. He is too disciplined, too focused, too institutionally minded, too deeply aware of his own position and its requirements to allow personal history to drive operational decisions. He understands, at a sophisticated level, that his job is to be the future king of the United Kingdom, not to relitigate the wounds of his childhood inside the pages of a constitutional crisis. But personal history does not simply dissolve because you are disciplined enough not to act on it. The hurt does not disappear because the institution requires you to suppress it. And as William's power grows, as his authority expands, as his team strengthens, as the informal architecture of the monarchy reconstructs itself around him, and as Camilla's institutional foundation simultaneously narrows, the dynamic between them is entering new territory that nobody inside the palace is entirely sure how to navigate. The Shadow King is becoming less of a shadow with every passing month, and every single person in that building can feel it. Let us now look at what this all means. Not for the gossip of it, not for the drama of it, but for the genuine, serious, historically significant constitutional question that is sitting at the centre of this entire story. Britain has not experienced a prolonged, deliberate, structured transfer of operational power from a reigning monarch to their heir since. And this is the comparison that keeps coming up among historians. Arguably, the transition from George VI to Elizabeth II. And that transition was not planned, it was not deliberate, it was not structured. It was precipitated by death. George VI died, Elizabeth became queen. The transition was instant, total, and absolute. What is happening now is categorically different. What is happening now is something the British constitutional system has almost no modern template for, no established framework to handle, no set of precedents to draw on with confidence. It is not a regency. Charles is not incapacitated in the formal, legal sense that would trigger the regency provisions. He continues to perform sovereign functions. He is, constitutionally, fully the king. It is not an abdication. Charles has made no public or private indication that has been credibly reported of any intention to formally renounce the throne. It is something in between. Something the Regency Act of 1937 was never designed to accommodate. Something that the constitutional conventions, which have evolved over centuries to manage clear, binary transitions of power, do not cleanly address. It is a living, breathing, real-time power transfer being conducted inside an institution whose entire historical experience of transition has been through death. And the question that constitutional scholars are beginning to ask, that senior politicians in Westminster are beginning to murmur about in private, that palace insiders are raising with carefully disguised anxiety, is this. At what point does William's de facto authority, his actual, operational, decision-shaping authority over the workings of the Crown, require a formal constitutional framework to contain and account for it? Because here is the constitutional problem that nobody wants to say out loud. Right now, William is making decisions or significantly shaping and influencing decisions that affect the governance of the United Kingdom. He is doing so without the constitutional accountability that formally and legally attaches to the office of king. He cannot be questioned about his decisions in Parliament. He cannot be held accountable through any of the formal constitutional mechanisms that exist to ensure that power in a democratic system is answerable to the people over whom it is exercised. He carries the practical, operational weight of royal power without the formal, constitutional, publicly declared responsibility that is supposed to accompany it. That is, historically, a dangerous place for any democratic institution to find itself. Power without formal accountability is the definition of a constitutional grey zone. And grey zones, in constitutional systems, do not remain grey indefinitely. They resolve. The question is only whether they resolve in an orderly, planned, transparent way, or in a chaotic, crisis-driven, historically damaging way. William knows this. He is not a naive man. He has spent his entire adult life studying the institution he will inherit. He understands its architecture, its vulnerabilities, its extraordinary resilience, and its genuine fragility more thoroughly than almost anyone alive. Charles knows this. Whatever his health challenges, Charles remains a man of formidable intellectual engagement with the constitutional dimensions of his role. He has thought more deeply about the monarchy's place in British life than any monarch in generations. The Prime Minister's office knows this. Whoever occupies number 10 Downing Street at any given moment is acutely aware of the transition that is underway, and is managing their relationships with both Charles and William with enormous care. But knowing that a constitutional grey zone exists, and having the political will, the institutional courage, and the historical imagination to formally resolve it, are very different things. And when, not if, but when, Charles's health reaches a point where the informal arrangement that currently exists becomes formally untenable, where the gap between William's de facto power and his de jure position becomes impossible to paper over with diplomatic language and careful scheduling, the British constitutional system will be asked to navigate a moment it has not faced in living memory. A crown that has already moved. A king who is not yet formally king. And a country that will be asked, in the starkest and most unavoidable terms, what it actually wants its monarchy to look like. What role it wants that monarchy to play, and what accountability it expects from the most powerful, unelected institution in the United Kingdom for the next 50 years. Now look at the next generation. Look at George. I am a teenager now, already attending his first formal royal engagements, already being photographed in the context of the succession, 3 generations visible in a single frame. Charles, William, George. The weight of it. The extraordinary, almost incomprehensible weight of that lineage and what it means. William's entire strategic orientation, his choices about how to modernize the monarchy, his instinct to reduce the working royal family to a tight, functional core, his determination to rebuild public trust in the institution after the turbulence of recent years. All of it is oriented not just toward his own reign, but toward ensuring that when George eventually inherits, there is something worth inheriting. An institution that has earned its place in British life, not simply assumed it. That is the long game William is playing, and the shadow reign we are witnessing right now is the opening move of that long game. This is not a story about palace gossip. It is not a story about family tensions or tabloid drama, or the kind of breathless speculation that fills column inches without illuminating anything. This is a story about power, about how power moves in one of the world's oldest constitutional systems, about the gap between formal structures and operational reality, about what happens when a monarchy designed to transfer power only through death encounters a monarch who is determined to manage that transfer while he is still alive. The British monarchy has survived wars, abdications, social revolutions, the loss of empire, the death of the most beloved monarch in modern history, and a period of scrutiny so intense that its survival as an institution was genuinely in question. It has survived because of its extraordinary, frustrating, sometimes maddening capacity to adapt slowly, cautiously, without ever quite admitting that it is adapting to the reality of the moment it finds itself in. It is adapting right now, in real time, before our eyes. The shadow reign of Prince William is not a scandal. It is not a conspiracy. It is not evidence of betrayal or disloyalty or constitutional bad faith. It is the British monarchy doing what it has always done, navigating a crisis through institutional evolution, through the careful redistribution of authority, through the quiet, unannounced, but unmistakable movement of power from one generation to the next. But this time, the movement is faster than it has ever been. The health of the king is more precarious than the palace will publicly admit. The demands on the heir are greater than any constitutional framework currently acknowledges. And the questions about accountability, about transparency, about what the British public is entitled to know about how their constitutional monarchy actually functions, those questions are no longer the exclusive territory of academic historians and constitutional lawyers. These are the questions that every person watching this video tonight is now, whether they know it or not, living inside. The Shadow King is here. The shadow reign has begun. And the most important constitutional question in the United Kingdom right now is not whether William will become king, that is inevitable, but whether, by the time he formally does, the distinction between his current position and that formal title will mean anything at all. That is the question I want you to take into the comments section below this video. Should William's expanded authority be formally acknowledged? Should it be given a constitutional framework with the accountability that framework brings? Or does the monarchy's unique, ancient, adaptive power depend precisely on the ambiguity that allows it to operate without ever being fully, formally accountable? Tell me what you think, because this is not an academic debate. This is happening right now. This is the British Crown, reshaping itself in real time in ways that will determine what kind of institution it is for the next half-century. Drop your thoughts below. And if you are not already subscribed to this channel, if this kind of forensic, unfiltered, evidence-based royal commentary is what you have been looking for, then subscribe right now and hit the notification bell, because what is coming next goes even deeper. The next piece goes into territory that the palace has spent significant resources trying to keep out of your awareness, and you are going to want to be there when it drops. The crown is moving. The question is whether Britain is paying attention.